This is a Nice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another NHL team season preview video here on the Ice Guys. 32 teams in 32 days rolls along. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith. And in this video, based on who you see as our guest, you know him well, Jonathan Davis, on to join us to talk Los Angeles Kings for the upcoming 2025-2026 NHL season. We're opening up some old scars, some old wounds that we thought were healed. No, we're going to rip that bandage open and get those scars and wounds right back in the open again, talking about the LA Kings and certainly some of what transpired last season involving the team, particularly in the playoffs. But Jonathan, first of all, it's been a while since we've gotten a chance to check in. How are you? Things good?
Things are good. It's been a good summer for the most part. A lot of good times at the beach, and ran into the former GM a couple of times. Seems to be enjoying retirement.
Yeah, no doubt. And certainly it's one of these deals where, retirement, always enjoyable, especially when you've been at it a while. And the LA Kings are looking for certainly big things here moving forward this season. Will they is the big question. Obviously, we'll start with looking back a little bit on last year with this Los Angeles Kings team. They're obviously a team that, we were a little bit surprised, to say the least, going into last year that Jim Hiller was the head coach of the LA Kings team. And when you look at the way things transpired in the playoffs and the fact that he was retained for this season, it was even more shocking. Now, keep in mind, there's a guy that's been with Mike Babcock in the past. And, of course, Ken Holland's obviously knows Mike Babcock quite well from his Detroit days. You wonder if he's going the extra mile to give Jim Hiller a chance to let this thing work. Let it work out, let it be successful. Question is, I don't know if it's going to be successful, but we'll get into that. The LA Kings last year, 105 points. They finished second in the Pacific Division behind the Vegas Golden Knights. When you look at them last year, as far as 250 goals, 206 goals against last year, they were actually, the typical LA Kings. They played more unders than overs, 47 and 37 to the under last year during the regular season. And when it's all said and done, I think when you look at the Kings going into this particular season, last year it was we know the problems with beating Edmonton, obviously, in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Very real. Couldn't get over the hump. But last year was supposed to be that season where this was supposed to be the time to finally do it. You got home ice. You got Edmonton a little bit wobbly. We were talking about how McDavid and Draisaitl were a bit banged up late in the regular season. Perfect opportunity with home ice advantage going into that series. And you certainly couldn't have started it much better than you did. But then there was momentum flip, and it was definitely game 3 and game 4 in Edmonton, both winnable games that were pissed away with playing too conservative, too much of, holding back when you had a lead, letting Edmonton get momentum, a terrible challenge in the one game by Jim Hiller that led to an immediate Edmonton power play, and they connected on it. There was just so many instances. A failed clearance by Quentin Byfield in the defensive zone in the late in the third period in that series cost them, and they had to obviously go to overtime, and the rest was history. I mean, it was just, there's so many events, almost like a domino effect, that had to transpire for the LA Kings to have a series that was in their firm control and to see it just totally flip on them. The way it did against the Edmonton Oilers. And we all saw it last year. If you watch this show, I'm not going to rehash it because I'm exhausted talking about it. So I'm only going to mention it in brief, how the ice time delineation by this coach was absolutely pathetic last year in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's hard to envision that there's a certain players, not even here anymore, but Jordan Spence, getting in a game, 2 minutes and 45 seconds of ice time, just absolutely absurd. And you're wearing guys out that shouldn't be playing, 30 minutes like they were in that series against Edmonton. So that was an issue. Bad challenge in one game, failure to play a style of play that was working and stick with it instead of just, tightening up and just trying to sit back and protect the lead, which you cannot do against a team, especially a team that's got two of the best scorers, two of the best players in the world, like the Edmonton Oilers did. So just incredible that the LA Kings took a series that they were in firm control of and basically pissed it all away. And now as a result, it ends up being another disappointing end of the season, another first round exit, another situation where they lose to the Edmonton Oilers in the first round, and more question marks than answers. in my opinion, going into the season. If you look at them up front, you got to like what you saw when Andrei Kuzmenko, Anze Kopitar, and Adrian Kempe, ended up having that chemistry together. Obviously Kuzmenko helped them offensively. There's still questions about what he can do both ends of the ice as away from the puck. Fiala, Byfield, Laferriere. I think that was one of the best elements of last year was Quinton Byfield, and obviously his continued growth. I know people are going to think back of the unfortunate, failure to get the puck out in the Edmonton series, but he still had, I think an outstanding season overall, and is certainly going to be looking to build on that. Alex Laferriere showed, what he's capable of as well. I've always been a fan of his game. Warren Fogel's addition was good to this hockey team. And of course they bring in a guy that was helped them lose obviously in the first round last year. Was a proponent of it and obviously was good for Edmonton in Corey Perry, now a member of this LA Kings team. Now the question is going to be, Edmonton certainly got a lot more returns from Corey Perry at this stage of his career than maybe a lot of people would have thought. Is this going to be the right fit for him here with the Los Angeles Kings? And at his age now, in this stage of his career, does he have another good year in his bag of tricks like he had? And remember how he stepped up for Edmonton in the playoffs. And the question is, can he deliver that here for the Edmonton Oilers or for the LA Kings this year like he did against Edmonton? The blue line is very, similar to last year. You've got Mikey Anderson. You got Drew Doughty. Joel Edmondson. I think Brandt Clark's going to have an elevated role on this blue line, but you do question, Dumoulin at this stage of his career, bringing him in, and Cody Ceci, and certainly the money and the financial endowment that he gets coming over to the LA Kings. Some questions about just how they spent their money here, the LA Kings, on this blue line. And to me, there's still some questions back there, especially when you get to that third pair going into this upcoming season. And the funny thing about the LA Kings is the, they had it all set up for them perfectly, on a silver platter, that home ice in the first round against Edmonton. And the fact that, the best chance probably to beat the Oilers, given the Oilers' vulnerabilities as well. Now they've got to try to run it back and take that step after failing it with squandering a great opportunity last year off a season where you really couldn't have gotten much better out of Darcy Kemper. Darcy Kemper's numbers last year were outstanding for the most part. You give him credit because obviously the Washington tenure did not go well for Darcy Kemper in his 2 years with the Capitals. Last year with the Kings, 2.02 goals against average, 921 save percentage were his numbers during the season. And are you going to be able to bank on Darcy Kemper replicating that and duplicating that kind of a performance this season in net? And if he doesn't and he takes that step back, and which is very possible because Darcy Kemper's done this before. We're off a great year. The next year, it's not so good. We have seen this happen to him in the past. And if he does stumble, he does falter, well, there's a bunch of unknowns. Is Anton Forsberg number one caliber? I'm not convinced. Phoenix Copley's in the goaltending rotation, and I know they like the young kid, Carter George, but, we're going to thrust him potentially already and trust him, when he hasn't played a game in the NHL. Probably not as far as trusting him to be great right away. So from that standpoint, you look at this LA Kings team, and there's, to me, a bunch of questions. And I just don't like it from an optics standpoint. They didn't make a coaching change, quite honestly. And I think Ken Holland being a little too loyal to a guy that he's got some kind of a past history with. So when you look at this LA Kings team, I like them under their point total. The miss the playoffs is out there at FanDuel. We've talked about the stage of elimination prop bets that you can find at FanDuel, where you can bet teams to miss the playoffs, or if they make the playoffs, bet them to get eliminated in the first round, the conference semifinals, the conference finals, and then, of course, the Stanley Cup final. Well, for LA, I just go right to miss the playoffs at plus 220. I think it's going to be very difficult. The Western Conference around them is getting harder, not easier. And there's just, I don't like the way they reconstructed the blue line. They think they could have done a better job than an aging retread in Dumoulin and a guy they kind of overpaid in Cody Ceci to help this blue line. And then up front, I like what I'm seeing, but at the same point in time, they've been just damned by this. We play one way and then we get a lead and we sit back, and that's just not the way you can play this way this day and age in the NHL. And I've got, as great as Kemper was last year, he's the kind of goalie I don't have the utmost faith and confidence in being that consistent every year, being healthy, being available, and playing at his highest level. So put it all together, and the tough conference. And keep in mind this Pacific Division, and I know Alex and Jonathan might have something to say about this too. Vegas not going anywhere. Edmonton not going anywhere. What if Anaheim takes a step forward this year? San Jose's got a long way to go, but they're probably going to be a little bit more competitive this year. And that's not to mention any of the teams in the other division as well, the Central, that you're going to have to deal with. So I think it's going to be a struggle just to make it into the postseason this year for the LA Kings. And I am beyond mystified that Jim Hiller kept his job after last year, bottom line. Alex, we'll go to you. What do you think for the LA Kings?
Yeah, we go back to the beginning of last postseason, and I was very high and optimistic about this team. I liked how they were playing heading into the playoffs. I liked the form of Darcy Kemper, as you mentioned. It's a guy who had been streaky throughout his career, but we've seen him string together at the right time. We saw that in Colorado, where he ends up winning a Stanley Cup. We saw a strong season in Washington. This was a guy who, if you look back, 3 of the last 4 seasons, he's had 5 shutouts. He's had, been the number one guy. He's had a lot of quality starts in his game during the regular season. And even going into the playoffs, the first 2 games looked like everything was on cruise control. Seemed like Edmonton was kind of having a little bit of their fatigue. They had a lot of injury issues heading into that series. It kind of seemed like this was finally the time where LA could slay the dragon. And then all of a sudden, shit just completely goes haywire. And Hiller starts mismanaging the bench, and there's a bunch of mistakes being made, and Edmonton grows into Edmonton the way that they always do whenever you let them hang around in a series. And there you go. It's 4-2. Oilers advance, and Kings are out. And like I said, here we are with roughly the same core, and you look at this aging core of guys, and these guys that are, on the wrong side of 30. You talk about Kemper and how well he played last year, but your immediate concern, and I said that even if they have gone on to win the Cup, I had futures on them to win the West and the Cup. I had futures on Kemper to win Conn Smythe, but I still would have been saying this same thing now had they gone on and won it all. Can Kemper run it back? Can he do it again? With a goalie that gets older over time, playing in high leverage games, playing a bunch of minutes, you wonder, at any point, especially in a physical league and in a physical division, mind you, that one bump, the one groin pull, that one stretch of a save, and next thing you know, he's out. And this is a team that has really kind of struggled with their goalie depth off and on the last few years, where it looked like, okay, they've got everything rounded up. We like Phoenix Copley as a backup. We've liked some of the guys they've had as backups, but you don't want to rely on them as being the number one guys. So that's where the problems lie in first. Then you start looking at, if you're going to start giving some of these aging guys like a Drew Doughty heavy minutes, like he's been playing like it's 2012 again, Anze Kopitar, heavy minutes, and playing him at every single slot that you can't rely on these guys to keep cruising the way they have for 80 to 82 games. The way they've been doing for the last 15, 16 years, it's just simply not feasible. And I don't trust in some of the talent that they've had coming through the pipeline. I think the bulk of the talent they really had in the pipeline, they're here now. And some of these younger guys, I think they need a little bit more time and seasoning. And when you mentioned about how good the rest of this conference is, especially in the Central, I don't see where the wild card spots stack up. So the only thing they have to battle for really is that 3rd place spot in the Pacific. And I think Anaheim, we talked about in that preview, has what it takes to maybe overtake a team like LA and the rest of those bottom feeders in the Pacific and get into the playoffs. So I'm with you. I'm fading them to miss the playoffs. I got plus 225. I got them under 98 points. I'm fading them in game 1. I'm on Colorado minus $1.14 on the money line as they travel to Crypto.com Arena. And when you look at the schedule breakdown, you have 14 road games in the first 22 games overall. So that's a little bit of tough sledding. And if we see maybe this team takes a few losses, maybe that seat under Jim Hiller will get a little bit hotter. We talked about some of the coaches that are still kind of floating around. It would not shock me one bit if this team just falls apart early. They end up having to fire Hiller, and it's just kind of a fire sale of things. So this is a team where even if they were to get in the postseason, I think that's the high point for me, is that they get to the playoffs and they lose in the first round. The low point is that they just completely tank out. Hiller gets fired, and they start trying to look at maybe retooling this thing, not necessarily rebuilding it. So it's not looking good in my eyes over there in Hollywood.
And as we've mentioned on previous team preview videos, there might be a quicker trigger finger for certain coaches to make a change when there's a certain Peter DeBoer out there now on the market after his obviously falling out with the Dallas Stars at the end of last year over the whole handling of Jake Ottinger, which we've talked about in that Edmonton series and how he handled it in the postgame after the fact. So like I said, if there's issues coming out of the gate and a slow start, and not just LA anymore, any team in this league, there's definitely him in particular, Peter DeBoer, and coaches and names out there that you'd be more than interested in bringing in as a potential replacement. It's just funny to see this, the playoff numbers again, where they actually scored 4 goals per game. The power play, again, in that Edmonton series was clicking at 40%.
Yeah.
And yet you look at the defensive numbers, and that's where it went awry in that Edmonton series, where they're blowing leads and, they couldn't keep Edmonton off the scoreboard. In the playoffs last year, I'm looking at every team. There's no team that gave up. There's LA standing by themselves. But after that, the next team to give up the most goals was New Jersey, 3.8 goals allowed per game. Tampa, 3.8 goals allowed per game in the playoffs. LA stands alone as the only team to give up 4.5 goals per game last year in the playoffs. Now, again, they only had the one series, the first round against Edmonton, but no team except the Los Angeles Kings in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year gave up north of a 4 goals per game average. Only LA did, and it was their undoing against Edmonton. Jonathan, have at it. What do you think here for the Kings?
Well, I mean, lots to dissect. Let's start with the coach, because that's definitely one of the hot button topics here. And I think that, in Jim Hiller's case, and, I raised the issue during Ken Holland's introduction. I think, Ken Holland talked about essentially last year was a learning curve. I mean, let's remember that this is the team that had 105 points in the regular season, and mistakes were made during the playoffs. And he's going to, the hope is that he and his staff will learn from it. But I have to believe, as Alex was alluding to, that there's a short leash. And I think that, we get to the 20 game mark. If that record is not, above 500, then would not shock me to see the Kings make a move. Look, with Ken Holland, I think a very surprise hiring. This is a guy that was out of hockey, retired. But I think that, that part of this decision was, the relationships that he's got within the organization. The one thing that was concerning for me with Holler, the most concerning for me was that I'd say in the first half dozen interviews that Ken Holland did with various media people, he kept referring to the fact that part of the reason he took this job was that he was close to his home in Kelowna. It's the last thing that I want to hear. I don't care. And he talked about his family. He's got family in Chicago and Michigan. All the wrong reasons to be hiring a guy that.
How about I love the team situation? How about I like where things are headed with the organization? How about I like our prospect pool and what's coming up the pipeline? How about saying that's why you love the job? Not, hey, I'm close to home. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now the prospect situation stinks. I mean, outside of goalie, where Alex mentioned Carter George, who's probably a couple of years away, they're hoping, maybe Eric Portillo will get the first shot, the former University of Michigan goalie. But their prospect pool stinks. This is an organization that has gotten very old very quickly. There aren't forwards down with the Ontario Reign that are going to be taking jobs from players. So it's a concern. And, so when you look up front for Los Angeles, one of the big topics, you've got McDavid's contract coming up and Kaprizov and Eichel, but in Los Angeles, it's Adrian Kempe. He's got 1 year left on his deal. If I'm him, I don't know. I'm not going to be in any rush to sign a deal. And if LA was to lose Kempe, like they lost Gavrikov in the summer, big problem. Ian, you talked about the blue line. 4 guys on that blue line that are 31 years and older. These signings did not go over very well with the LA fan base with, Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin. But man, Cody Ceci owes his life to Ken Holland. It's 8 years of contract that Holland has now signed Cody Ceci to. Brant Clark, it's time for the training wheels to come off. What they did to him in the playoffs, not acceptable. This is the guy who's supposed to be the heir apparent to Doughty. Well, they better find out now. And I think the loss of Gavrikov from the blue line it's significant, because this is their guy who was their number one. He played no D man, played more minutes on the penalty kill for LA than Gavrikov. They're going to miss him. One of the things that we all benefited from late in the year was playing the Kings first period under. 45 goals they gave up last year in the first period. Remarkable.
Yep.
But I think they're going to be very tested to try to even come close to matching that number this year. So those are just some of the things that, come to mind right now.
Yeah, you're right. Defense, we think of this great, juggernaut, stalwart defense, and just when they got the lead, it was good luck coming back against them.
Yeah.
Well, Edmonton proved, yes, she can come back against them. And now when I look at it's also the lack of foot speed with some of these guys now they have on the back end. And it's such a skating game these days, and you've got to be able to just carry the puck and start the rush from the defensive zone when you do have the puck, and you worry about that with the likes of Dumoulin and with Cody Ceci. And you're right, it was Ken Holland as GM of the Oilers that gave Ceci all that money the first time around, and now here he is paying him again another nice big-time contract here to be with the LA Kings. And it's just the money he got and the term he got. That's the issue. Am I saying Cody Ceci's not, a capable defenseman? Yes, he can be. He's proven that at times. Even in Dallas, he fit in okay there with the Dallas Stars. It's just what you're paying him. It's just not at that price am I interested in Cody Ceci.
Well, Ian, I think the other thing is that, when you look at this organization and, look, their window is almost shut. I think Ceci and Dumoulin are two defensemen that have the potential to get the Kings, help them get to the playoffs. But when you take a look at both their numbers come playoff time, they become a shadow of their former selves, of their regular season selves. They just, they're not guys that you can count on come playoff time. So that would be a concern. Alex talked about, the fact that, Kemper being able to bounce back for another good year. I mean, are we going to see the Darcy Kemper that had that sub 900 save percentage and the goals against average that went up by over a goal and a half a game, especially with the blue line in front of him? So there's definitely a lot of concerns for me with this team. And, from a betting standpoint, I'm going to be a little cautious about how to play this team. I mean, last year, Kings games averaged combined score 5.56 goals a game. That was last in the NHL, or the lowest total. I don't know if we get that this year, just with the way that blue line works. And when it comes to props, my favorite prop, I agree with you. Like, I think LA misses, but I'm going to go, my prop that I'm playing is Adrian Kempe over 70.5 points. Contract year.
Yep. Yeah.
Contract year for Kempe. I think the only time he missed, I don't think he's ever gone under 70.5. In the last 2 years, I think he's gone over that number each of the last 2 seasons. I don't see any reason why he doesn't go over it a third time.
I don't disagree with that. I don't. And I find most of the time, not all the time, there's going to be some instances where it doesn't cash and it doesn't come through. But when you bet on player props and season-long player props, goals, points, if they can avoid injury, I find a lot of these players in their contract year go over. It's just you see them, they play like their hair's on fire, and they'll go that extra mile. They'll maybe shoot the puck more, knowing that they are, and just really do everything they can to be involved, especially if they're an offensive player. I mean, countless examples of this in recent years. Player has been a good season-long player prop bet to the over for their season-long player props when they're in a contract year. It's just natural. You're playing for the money. You're playing for the big contract. You're playing for the bag. And players will go above and beyond when they're in that spot. Yep.
And he's a guy where even if, say, things go poorly early for the Kings and he ends up maybe getting traded at the deadline, they can't come to a deal to sign him. I still think he would be able to clear that number. So.
Yeah, I'm very confident in that. It's you talked about Corey Perry, and look, he's not playing with McDavid and Draisaitl in Los Angeles. He's going to be on the fourth line. I don't, unless they had rejigged that power play and maybe go 5 forwards, I don't see how he plays number 1 power play time. So I'm not sure what his impact is, even if even when you take into the fact that he'll be 41 during the season.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just, he's good in a second power play role, but I don't know if he's going to get certainly onto that top unit for sure for this
And,
LA Kings team. Yeah.
and did the Kings maybe sign him to be the, I guess, to make a comparison to what you said earlier, the anti-Dumoulin and the anti-CC, where they're hoping he could be the guy to be the catalyst in the playoffs, not necessarily do a whole lot in the regular season?
Well, yeah, sure, but I think the other thing that they did was look, the fourth line. You guys talked about the fact that they only played 4 defensemen come the playoffs. They only played 3 lines come the playoffs.
Yeah.
They did rebuild that fourth line with Perry, Armia, and so those 2 guys, probably along maybe with an Alex Turcotte. Their fourth line becomes better than it was a year ago, only because they'll play them. So I think that's part of, they did need to address that topic.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. At least now we think with Dumoulin and Ceci, I'm like, we got questions about how effective they're going to be at this stage, but at least now it puts you in a spot where you should be playing 1 through 6 on the blue line if you're able to make it into the playoffs. But
Ian, here's the crazy thing. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was telling me that the fancy stats said last year Jordan Spence and Gavrikov had the best fancy stats when they played together over any other pair that LA had. It's just Holland's philosophy is he wants big guys back there. And I understand that come playoff time. So I think that's the hope, is that I think this is a blue line that he hopes is better built for the playoffs than the one that they had last year.
Got to get there first, though.
Got to get there first.
Yeah,
exactly.
Got to get there first, and that's going to be the big question mark is if they are able to, for sure. But like I said, when you look at everybody's trying to get a big blue line these days. Everyone sees Florida and Vegas, Florida back-to-back years, and even when Vegas won a few years ago against Florida, what did they all have in common? Deep blue lines and size on the blue line. Yep, both teams. And now it's like a copycat league, right? They see, hey, Florida and Vegas, big blue lines, size on the blue line, and they win in Stanley Cups. Let's try to do the same.
One big thing, though, is that the size of Florida and the size of Vegas had speed, and LA just simply doesn't.
No, you're absolutely right.
Big, but you can't be you cannot be slow-footed. You cannot be stuck in your own. You got to be big, but you got to be able to move. You got to be able to transport the puck, and you got to be able to skate. And that's the thing. That's what makes Florida's blue line such a wonder, is that they got the size, but they've got the mobility as well.
Yeah, look, the other thing facing Los Angeles, is this the last year for Anze Kopitar? 67 points last year. Look, this has never been a team that's been an offensive juggernaut, but his numbers have continued to go down since that 92-point year in 2018. I don't know how much is left in the tank. And then with Byfield, look, his goals I think went up by 1 or 2. His points maybe even been 1 less. Look, there's a lot of potential here with Byfield, and they better hope that he continues to blossom. But there's still a lot of immaturity in his game, and that's one thing that needs to change. And it's not just not being able to get the puck out, but one of the concerns that someone had told me was, when they were when he was out there on the penalty kill, there were multiple times when they were killing a penalty and he was taking penalties, another penalty in the defensive zone. So now they're down 2 men, and they're just trying to get him to become more of a pro. There's still a lot to learn, and they're asking a lot from him. And he may, for this team to be successful, he really needs to be their number 1 center.
Yeah. And what's funny about Kopitar? I mentioned that you're right. His points have declined slightly each of the last 3 years, and yet last year with this team, he was second on the team in points with 67.
Well, that's a very low bar, though, right? I mean, Mason McTavish, you guys, I'm sure, covered it in the Ducks preview, didn't he? He led them with 22, and I think that would have been 3rd best on most teams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's 100% true. And like I said, Kopitar, you're right. You wonder if there's nowhere to go but down right now. Plus, another thing that you talk about offensively for the Kings, and that's why I keep feeling they're going to score goals enough this year. There's enough goal scoring in them. I think defensively they take a hit. I'm actually targeting some overs in Kings games this year, totals wise. I think they could be more of an over team. But the one thing I am concerned is there's a couple elements. Can Kopitar, at least stay in that 60s range points wise, mid to high 60s? Is Byfield going to keep building on getting stronger and better as an offensive player in this league, which I think he's very capable of. I think he's still got a high ceiling. But what concerns me about them offensively is, we talked about this last year on the Ice Guys show, is that Jonathan and I both mentioned this. Some of the best hockey we've ever seen Kevin Fiala play. Is he going to be able to deliver 35 goals again, which was a career high for him this past season? We'll see.
By the way, it was the first time in 17 years the Kings had 2 35-goal scorers in the same season with Kempe and Fiala last year.
Wow. So it had been a while. But, yeah, Fiala was great. But is he going to be – are we at the point now with Fiala we can bank on him being a 30-goal scorer every year? I guess we're going to find out this upcoming season.
Yeah, look, he's a bit of an enigma. And you just never know. You never know if, because he usually makes one good play and then 2 bad ones. Can he cut the 2 bad ones out of his repertoire? Yeah. That's the thing.
He did have a 33-goal season with Minnesota, but that's as close as he ever came to the 35 that he had last year, and everything else was in the 20s. So will Fiala bring that same offensive production? A big question. I like what Jonathan said. I didn't bet any player props with the Kings season long, but I don't mind the Kempe one, especially with him being in a contract year. It makes sense. I know I've been in a spot where I've played a lot of Matthew Nyes for Toronto last year. Actually not a contract year because he was an RFA, but still there was talk that he was still pushing, knowing that the contract discussions would start. It was Marner, too. Marner was in the contract year, and obviously a big offensive year for him. But like I said, that's usually a good bet. The contract year players, their season-long player props usually worth a look. Great stuff. This has been your LA Kings season preview. Before we wrap it up, we will hear from our brand new smoke sponsors of the Ice Guys, our good friends at Royal Cannabis.
Royal Cannabis, where the kings and queens shop.
Check them out, royalcannabisshop.com, and 20% off using the promo code IceGuys. Great stuff on the LA Kings season preview video, and good to see Jonathan Davis again. You'll see him a lot, I'm sure, this year on our live betcast. We'll have to get him on some daily shows, too, during the course of the season this year as well, with time permitting. But great stuff. I hope you all enjoyed this LA Kings season preview. For Alex B. Smith and Jonathan Davis, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been your Los Angeles Kings season preview video as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along, courtesy of the Ice Guys.